Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have some very special guests for you, and that is the owners of Viva Raw. So today I'll be joined with Zach and Jennifer from Viva Raw Pets. They are a raw dog and cat food brand. The brand is relatively new. They've started within the last 3 years, and I am so impressed by this company, their ethics, the ingredients, the sourcing, the production process, and apparently so is the FDA. I can't wait for you guys to watch this. If you do want to try Viva for your pets, you can use the code AUTUMNSUMMERS at checkout for 20% off your first order. This is one of the highest quality pet foods on the market today, and I'm so excited to share this brand with you guys and for you all to listen to what Zach and Jennifer have to say about their pet food company. One thing that I can really vouch for is how transparent Zach and Jennifer are and how much passion they have for their company. I actually feed Viva Raw to all 4 of my cats. They eat a few things. We also do some homemade raw with them as well. But they love Viva so much, and I feel so comfortable feeding them this food. I really do feel like Viva has your pet's best interest at heart, and that is not true for many pet food companies, unfortunately. All right, guys, I hope you enjoy. Okay, hi guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have with me Zach and Jennifer, the owners of Viva Raw. I'm really excited for you guys to be here. I just wanted to, jump right in and have you tell us a little bit about Viva.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, hey guys, by the way, I'm Jennifer and this is Zach. So, we started Viva almost 3 years ago. It feels kind of crazy to say that because that feels like it was at the same time yesterday, but a really long time ago. But we started Viva. So before then, we had always been like homemaking our own dog's food. And then obviously being like busy and all that stuff, we for a time period, we were trying to go out there, buy something pre-made, see if that made our lives easier. And when we were looking at the options, we really just like none of them really like felt like it was the same quality and the same amount of like trust we had in them as of course like as we were doing at home. So then so we kind of stuck with homemaking her meals, and then after a couple years we had the opportunity to kind of take a step back and see more broadly what we wanted to do with like our careers, what we were actually passionate about. And we thought, hey, why not give it a shot? Let's try making pet foods the way we wanted to, the way we felt best, and see who else was interested. And that's just kind of how Viva started. We started off posting in local Facebook groups. Our very first order was like a Google form, and then we drove around North Carolina doing deliveries, and it kind of just grew from there. So after that, it was a huge learning experience. And learning experiences really along the way too, of like just like how to, we started working inside of a commercial kitchen, the shared kitchen space. And then from there, we found our first manufacturer, which is like a USDA like sausage plant. And then also along the way grew our team a little bit, and also launched a couple of like really cool recipes too.
Yeah. So you guys have been doing it for 3 years now. I think I heard of you guys maybe like a year and a half ago through Dr. Judy Morgan on her page. She was talking about you guys. And the first time that I got your food, I was like so impressed because a lot of the times when you do, order like raw foods, it comes and it's got like almost like a little bit of a grayish color to it. It's a little mushy, from the freezer and stuff, but yours is like so vibrant. It looks like homemade, like when you put it in the bowl and you're kind of mashing it up. It's great. I pulled almost a whole kidney out of it one time. I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, that's not for everyone, but we think it's super cool. We and
Yeah.
you're probably what you got with like our chunky recipe too.
Yeah.
That was one of the things. I don't think any other company does it to this day, but we made like a obviously the normal ground version, but then we made like a chunky version where you left the boneless pieces because we just wanted to see what was in the food, right? We thought that was kind of cool. Grosses some people out, but that extra texture also just gives like pets, like extra chewing,
Yeah.
dental health, like there's many benefits there too.
Yeah, and it's great that you offer both too, because sometimes I'll hear people complain about how their dog doesn't like the texture of a certain food or something like that. Kind of like pate, the super fine texture. So you guys have the chunked. I like that one because I like to see everything that's in it. Okay, so when you guys first started doing this, I think I'd heard that you started kind of just like, were you doing it in your kitchen and then you moved to, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we in the very, very beginning, like
Mhm.
even when we are at the Facebook group sort of
Yeah.
stage where we were actually just posting like a Google form link there, we were still working out of a commercial kitchen. So
Okay.
what it meant was that we couldn't do what we do really like
Yeah,
in
I was
home.
like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Absolutely. So it was like a commercial kitchen. So think
Okay.
of like other companies like caterers or like baking companies or just like
Food
food
trucks.
trucks, stuff like that.
Okay.
They would just like book time at these facilities. So it's a
Gotcha.
shared space where you just like book a set amount of time that you need to produce your stuff. So we started there and it was just the two of us. So it was definitely super, super exhausting for like the first, I would say like we were probably in there for like 9 to 10 months. Just
Okay.
the beginnings of Viva really was just like me and Jennifer making every single batch of food, shipping every single box of food
Oh my
out.
God.
We like talk about how it's just like, you know, we
Good thing we
good
were
thing we were
young.
young, yeah.
Good thing we're still young.
But it was pretty exhausting, especially because like during the week we had to ship out the boxes, and so the only time we had available to make the food was like on the weekends. So there was a period of time where it's like Saturday, Sunday, we're always booked with making the food. And then like Monday through Wednesday, we're like, shipping everything out. And then like Thursday and Friday were like where we could like work technically.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's also why we knew that we needed to like move into like a larger facility, like long term.
Yeah. The level of commitment that it takes to try to start a dog food brand is crazy. I mean, how did you guys know you wanted to get into that?
I would say like, I mean, one thing you kind of need at the start of any like difficult journey is just like a little bit of naivety. Like you have to believe that it's not like you have to feel like you know what you're getting yourself
Yeah.
into a little bit. You have to at least know like the next step. And that's kind of how we did it. Obviously, if at the start, if we knew everything we know now, like we would have never started, right? But you just have to I think it's like the baby steps along the way. Like at each point, we're like, okay, if we can just like get that done, then like we'll be good. And then you keep finding like new goals to set for yourself. But yeah, it, I would say we never really expected Viva to like kind of become what it is today, and we're very lucky that it is in this place. But just you have to like do the little baby steps to get to where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what Jennifer is describing is like if a lot of people like yourself or even like the Dr. Judy's of the world, and we talked to her plenty about this, but it's like you almost know too much about like what it is would be like to like try to start a dog food company that you wouldn't do it. And like
Yeah, I got what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, so like we were a little bit left in the dark when we first started because we just thought, oh, like, we've prepped her meals, we've made a lot of homemade meals. Like, could it be that much worse? And the answer is yeah, it can. And like there's a lot of additional complexity that you sort of just figure out along the way. And then every time something pops up, we're like, oh, okay, maybe this is just like the last challenge we have to solve, and it just keeps getting more and more complicated. So a little bit of that is sort of the reason for why we're here today.
Yes. Okay. So, could you tell me a little bit about your food and what you started this company because you weren't finding in the market what you were looking for. So tell me a little bit about what makes you guys stand out. For one, when I'm looking at a dog food brand, I always look at three things first, and then if they pass that, I'll look into the company a little bit deeper. And it's always ingredients, sourcing, and then production process. And you guys passed all three of those, so I was super excited and started looking into it. But what are some of the things that you wanted Viva to stand for that you weren't finding in the industry or in other foods?
Yeah. So I think it it basically mirrors like what you said. And I think the like our philosophy in the food we make and how we run Viva is like we want to make a food that we're proud to like feed our own dog and our own pets, and of course hopefully you guys is. So starting with like your list, basically sourcing, for us, we only work with like farms that raise their animals with no hormones or antibiotics ever, which is like it's basically the step in between like organic grass-fed type deal and then like the conventional. So obviously we're trying to, of course, like maintain quality, but kind of find a balance with price. So with the level of sourcing that we're at, and we've visited almost all of the farms that we work with. By just not using those things, like the farms are actually doing more in terms of like cleanliness, feed quality, humane handling to make sure the animals can stay healthy. Right. And that's important to us too. It's like, like the quality of the food it starts like from the animal where it comes from. So that was number one. That was one of the big things for us. Kind of in line with that, with all of our balanced recipes, what you'll find is they're supplemented with whole foods rather than synthetics. We just wanted to make sure that the nutrients are coming from kind of like a more well-rounded form rather than just like a specific vitamin and mineral that's like one-dimensional.
Yeah, like whole food. Something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with plants and like kind of whole food sources, you're not just getting that one thing you're using it for, you're getting all the other like bioactive compounds and things like better absorption, better use from the body. So that was like formulation took us really long for each time we did it for our dog recipes and our cat recipes. So we could talk about that too. And then finally, the last thing you said about manufacturing is, so we work with a USDA facility. What this means is like the USDA kind of oversees all like meat production for human consumption. And part of the challenge in our journey earlier on was like finding someone who's making human food and getting them to say yes to bringing in pet food. Because they're all like, oh no, like pet food, like that's dirty, you're going to contaminate my facility, I'm staying away from that. So that was it took us a really long time to essentially convince and essentially show our current partner like what are the ingredients we're bringing in, our processes, and how that's like just the same, if not like slightly more elevated than what he's doing.
Well, yeah, honestly, I mean, the way that you guys source your ingredients, the majority of those ingredients are probably way better than what
yeah, they don't
what the majority of the population
is. Yeah, there's not a lot of organic veggies in sausage. So.
Yeah, I always joke around that all of my pets eat way better than I do.
Yeah, it's very, very true. But yeah, I mean, like to that point, like there was that stigma that once we sort of like broke down those sort of boundaries, and I think like the facility sort of realized that what we're bringing in was truly like human grade standards, and what we're trying to do and accomplish was also in accordance with like human grade manufacturing. It made sense. And like, I think for us too, there are a lot of pet foods, like, don't get us wrong, I mean, it is absolutely legal to manufacture a pet food in an FDA facility. But I think for us, it represents something different just due to the nature and the processes that are in place at a USDA facility innately. Like it goes all the way down from the head of the facility down to the employees. And in terms of their day-to-day, you would describe them as just like habits almost, right? Like being in an environment where you like have an inspector on the floor and like, are beholden to certain types of things that you can and cannot do, ultimately like results in a better outcome, even when pet food, which is not like USDA regulated, but we can make it in a USDA facility. It means that they are also like having all those habits sort of like come over to this side as well.
Right. So I'll break that down for a little bit for people that are listening that might not know. So pet food, the USDA really wants nothing to do with it. So what they're doing is not required. They are in a USDA kitchen, which means that somebody from USDA is in that kitchen at all times, correct?
Right.
And you guys also use all USDA inspected meat products as well, right?
Correct. Yep.
Which again is not required for pet food. And I always say that the best pet food companies are pretty much setting the standards for themselves at this point, because honestly, what AFCO and the FDA allows pet food companies to get away with is wild. So I'm always happy to find brands like you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was confusing for us to begin with as well. Like we were like, oh, so like we're gonna go into this USDA facility, but we're technically still like FDA inspected. So like when we had an inspection
Yeah.
recently, that was like from the FDA rather than from the USDA, because like you said, like USDA doesn't
Yeah.
that. But yeah, that's just how I guess things are set up in the US currently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just another note for people like the FDA and USDA thing, like the FDA regulates like a lot, like their scope is very broad. USDA is specifically kind of focused on like human meat and meat products, versus the FDA, they've got like makeup, they've got pharmaceuticals, they've got pet food, they've got
We
like
got a lot going
a
on.
bunch of they have a lot going on in their portfolio.
One
Yeah.
of the other things that I really like about you guys too is I have worked in the pet food industry before, and when I started doing these like interviews and looking into pet food companies as well, it is like really difficult to get a lot of them to talk to you or answer questions. And you know, when you're talking to like the customer service team or whatever, they're trained on how to evade a lot of questions. And you guys were not like that at all. The first time that I reached out to you, I messaged you on your website, and I think Zach, it was you that answered.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. You were very helpful. You answered all of my questions, and you guys document a lot of this entire process on your Instagram too. And I really challenge everybody that's watching this to find another dog food company that is doing that, because they're not. And I think it's really great that you guys are. I love watching your stories. You guys even did like a little snippet of the process with the FDA on your Instagram. Could you tell us a little bit about how that experience was?
Yeah. So yeah, what Autumn is talking about, we had like we just shared a little bit of our experience during our first FDA inspection. So I think this was maybe like 2 months ago now.
2-3 months ago. Yeah.
2-3 months ago. Basically, they we registered with our facility with them. So kind of what the FDA does is like they'll just, whenever they have a list, you don't know like the ordering or anything, but one day they'll just like drop by and like want to see things. So the process we went through with them was like over a course of a week. Kind of the first day they came, they just looked at our documentation, like our food safety plan, like our processes that we documented for how people should like do things and make the food inside the facility. And then they obviously had some questions about that. So over the rest of the week, they kind of came by, looked through like in person, kind of like how we were making the food, running our production. And I would say like I would say for us, going into it, like we were very like, I don't know, it's a little bit of like caution and like a little bit of suspicion, because we've heard, so like being in the business, you hear so much about like how the FDA really is like raw pet food. And I think like at the start they had almost a similar sentiment, because they've seen other pet food facilities in North Carolina, and I think we've gathered they didn't really have a great impression of them. But I think really what was interesting was like over the course of the couple days they were there, I think both sides, we started to get a better understanding of each other, whereas they were like, oh, like it's actually like a lot of the bad things they thought they would find in our place, like they didn't see at all. And at the end of it, they were really like, yeah, I think almost everything looks good here. Like we really weren't expecting it to go like this. And I think for us, it's like at the end of the day, we know they're trying to do their job. Sometimes it's a little like challenging to work through all of it with them, but yeah, it was not nearly as bad as we thought.
The other thing to note too, and I think this sort of sums it up pretty well, is that like I think the inspectors themselves, again, like Jennifer said, are trying to do the best that they possibly can. But they even said this like verbatim during the inspection, which is just like, we don't know how to regulate raw pet food. And I think that's sort of like, you know, indicative of the environment that we're like working through, which just like from a regulatory standpoint, this is like very, like we're like pushing the envelope for like what people are used to. But like once, you know, like we show them like our testing documentation, we show them like what we're doing behind the scenes from like a temperature control perspective, and things like that. I think that obviously helped educate them. Like this is like the first time they're seeing this sort of thing in like the state of North Carolina, to be honest. So I think a lot of it is just weirdly like helping educate the regulators, like as we still continue to try to do the absolute best we can. I think when just like there's a little bit of follow-up just afterwards, mostly in regards to like labeling and like and we're working on like an email update like to send it. You'll probably receive this if you're a customer of ours, you'll see it as well. But like they had some like little questions or things about on like how we label things, one of them being actually like human grade. And that's like a big one, right? Because like from our perspective, like literally everything we do is like 100% human grade. But I think from the perspective of like what is allowed, I guess like how they defined what human grade means, or how you can use the human grade definition for pet food, literally like if a human wouldn't feasibly be able to eat it, i.e. like a human wouldn't typically pick up, I don't know, a raw piece of meat and like eat it, then it cannot be considered human grade. So that's like literally the fundamental idea of it was sort of defined that way, which is like was a little bit, to be honest, like a little frustrating for us, right? Because like we had like work to like produce everything in this certain way and source a certain way. But yeah, that's also why you'll no longer see that like on like a lot of our website and like our labeling, but like literally nothing has changed, right? So
I was curious to see how this was going to go, because if you go on the AFCO website, and then just for anybody that might not know, AFCO writes some rather, I'm going to say, relaxed guidelines on what can and cannot go into pet food, but they don't have any regulatory authority. The FDA regulates the pet food. You go on the AFCO website and you read a lot of things like about, specifically I'll note the human grade. There is no definitive answers on a lot of things when it comes to like pet food. They'll be like, oh, it's up to the FDA's discretion, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
So it leaves a lot of like wiggle room for pet food companies, but human grade specifically, if you go read that page on the AFCO website, it is very confusing. They're like,
yeah, I agree with you.
Human grade has no legal term for pet food, but
yeah, it's a very strange like dynamic of AFCO being like they're kind of just like a pseudo regulatory body. Like they do say like, oh, they are not, like they're not government or whatever, but like basically the FDA / like all the state level regulators are like, we will follow AFCO, right? So the states are defining what rules they're going by, and like 99% of the time they're just like follow AFCO. So essentially the states are giving them that power, even though they're like, we're technically not.
And technically speaking, like they're not supposed, like we've talked with a lot of like we work with food safety consultants and food safety experts, right? Just to design all of our process and make sure that we're manufacturing safe, fresh food. And like we talked with them about this in depth, and they even said like, yeah, technically speaking, like your FDA regulators or your state regulators are not supposed to like view AFCO as like the one source of truth. They're supposed to take additional information that is like sensible and practical, et cetera, to inform their decision making. But what ends up happening is like they just look at specifically AFCO because there's no other like straight, documentation of anything. So they don't like to, I guess, venture outside of that or feel like they're maybe making a decision that is less like supported. So that is just the reality of what we're working through.
Yeah. And then specifically, so I wanted to talk about this a little bit too. Even though there's kind of this gray area with the human grade label right now, you guys, what this kind of does mean for pet food, you guys specifically are using human grade ingredients. And you are in a human grade kitchen. So it's just, when we're talking about this a little bit, it's just kind of like the FDA or AFCO trying to figure out what that means legally for pet food. And I guess you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what you guys were saying too is that because raw food is the raw pet food is not like usually intended to be cooked or whatever. They're saying that you can't label it as human grade now.
Right.
And let's talk about that a little bit too, because the FDA has a zero tolerance policy for foodborne pathogens in raw food. So there are usually systems put in place. Some people use HPP to like neutralize any bacteria that might be on the food. So this is something that I often hear as a concern for people that haven't raw fed before and they want to, or the vet has told them that their dog is going to die from a foodborne illness or something. A couple of things. I'll break down the dog side of this real quick. So one, it is actually rare for dogs to contract foodborne illnesses to begin with. Their stomachs are made, their entire digestive system is made to break down bad bacteria. They have been going outside and eating whatever they want since the beginning of time. Yes, it does happen. Specifically, I think because of the way that we are feeding dogs conventionally now. So we're diluting that very acidic stomach because of all of the unbiologically appropriate ingredients they are eating. But on your side of things, you guys are required to make sure that that food does not even have any foodborne pathogens in it. So tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So, yeah, to just shed some more context on the zero tolerance thing, the where that comes from is really just like an abundance of caution the government has towards like the people handling the food, right? Because the fear is there is some fear or concern about like the pets getting sick, but at the end of the day, they don't want people to get sick from handling, like kids, like elderly, immunocompromised, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we do a bunch of things to make sure that's the case with our food. It's not just one single thing, because what you were saying earlier, some people do HPP, some people do radiation, some people just cook the food, right? But we don't do any of that. So for us, it's like multiple steps along the process, starting with our sourcing. We're making sure to bring in clean ingredients from like we have really high standards from the farm we work with. And then going to like the storage, how we handle the food, how we manufacture it. Like the food really doesn't get above like frozen, like 32 as it goes through our entire process. We work in a refrigerated room. And finally, we also like test all of our batches. For like Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli, those are like the big ones that you want to look out for. So it's a holistic process. It's not just any one thing to make sure what we're putting out there meets all the requirements.
Yeah, that's great. So you guys are testing every batch. And again, for any people that are watching, not all companies do that. So that is great, thorough.
Yeah. So every single batch is tested for like the major ones that really are of concern for raw food. It's also worth mentioning that like we do use an antimicrobial wash on the raw ingredients as well. So really like on the surface of it, a lot of the reason why we don't want to use things like HPP or irradiation is also because one is it's questionable if the food is still as like bioavailable or like the nutrients are still all intact in the same way that you would want them to be. But also when we are applying sort of like an antimicrobial wash like on the surface of the meat, it also ensures that's the higher risk area, for example, like for like raw poultry, etc. And then like the inside of the meat obviously is not being affected, so a lot of those beneficial bacteria and things like that is also staying intact as we make the food. So
okay, awesome. And I actually put some percentages down for when we were talking about this. So just for our listeners, this is Susan Thixton's research from Truth About Pet Food, but she did research on pet food recalls from 2012 to 2021. And 66% of those recalls for foodborne illnesses were kibbles in that 10-year period. 32% were canned foods, and only 0.6% were raw. So I just like to throw those numbers out there a lot for people that are kind of concerned about that. Like we were just discussing, the FDA does have a zero tolerance policy on foodborne pathogens with raw food. In 10 years, only 0.6% of those recalls for raw food.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting statistic for multiple reasons. One is there is just such a spotlight on raw food and foodborne pathogens that almost like a reputable raw food manufacturer probably pays a lot closer attention to it compared to the other pet food makers, right? And because raw, quote unquote, inherently has a higher risk, you're doing more to try and mitigate it compared to kibble, who just relies on heat and extrusion.
Right.
And the other thing I think a lot of the difference in statistics you're seeing comes down to the sourcing and what kind of ingredients are going into each. Generally speaking, raw is probably is more higher quality stuff versus kibble. You really get rendered meats, you get leftovers from just the human consumption chain that doesn't make
scraps,
it. Yeah, so you really it's and that's where a lot of that comes from, and even through heat extrusion and also the handling process. There's really no one's putting kibble in a refrigerator or anything. And that's what leads to those microbial growth, the pathogen, the contamination. It may be counterintuitive at first glance, but if you think about really the process and what goes into each, you can start to see why there's a difference.
It's also important to know that just a reputable raw manufacturer, which there are more today than there ever were even just a couple of years ago, is going to be doing way more and be providing raw meat that is way safer than even you buying something from the grocery store, just as sort of context, because the zero tolerance policy applies to ready to eat, quote unquote, ready to eat foods, which not from a human perspective, but even just technically speaking, if you receive one of our packages, it is ready to feed really just your dog, right? You don't have to do anything to it. But when you go to the grocery store, there's this undertone of okay, yeah, we expect you to buy this piece of raw meat and cook it, which is why they're allowed to have for ground chicken. I think the latest number I saw was ground chicken can have up to 25% basically sampling for salmonella, 25% of them can return positive, and that would still be fine for that brand, which is
I heard you guys say this recently and it blew my mind because I did not know that. And I was oh my God, just another selling point for raw food, by the
way. Yeah, so it is pretty shocking, and really, I mean, the main reason why is because they're oh yeah, everyone's gonna just cook the ground chicken, right? That's why.
Yeah, and I think the thing with raw food, why it has this kind of sometimes scary reputation, is because it is newer, right? A lot of these regulations, zero tolerance, 10 years ago, people weren't really doing much about it. And even to today, because people see it as something exciting to start doing, mom and pop farms, butcher shops are oh, hey, people want my raw stuff that I wouldn't otherwise sell. So you get a lot of small operations who just aren't able or aren't aware of the rules and the requirements. And that's just definitely something for consumers to be aware of just make sure you kind of do your due diligence of looking into how stuff is made, whether or not they check the boxes and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Ask a lot of questions.
And real quickly too, I wanted to ask you guys, because there are some people that are just uncomfortable with feeding raw food, or their vet has made them uncomfortable with feeding it, etc. You are able to cook your food too, right?
Yes, that's correct. So that's actually quite unique. What we actually do is we grind the bones super, super finely. So it's basically a sandy sort of gritty texture, sort of post the way that we grind our bone, which allows for, we never recommend say baking our food for an hour, because either way, not really from a bone standpoint even, but really just from a nutritional standpoint, that's when potentially you have nutrient loss, especially with B vitamins and things that are susceptible to heat. So really what we say is a couple minutes, 3 to 5 minutes on sort of medium low heat searing on the stovetop is absolutely fine. And the bone is definitely fine enough to the point where it is safe.
Yeah, I was very impressed with that. You don't see that a lot with raw foods. And your brand, my cats eat it, by the way. Love it. I actually just got a video of them waiting for it the other day that I'm gonna post and tag you guys in. They're all screaming.
Yeah, definitely send that to us.
Yeah, I will do that. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming on here again. I'm going to attach details in this video where you can find Viva if you want to go and try it for your pets, and definitely follow them on their Instagram as well. I'm going to also attach those links to this video too. They really document a lot of the process, and if you're a dog food nerd like me, you're going to love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us,
This was
Autumn.
so much fun.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Zach and Jennifer from Viva Raw. Please go ahead and go check out the description box below. I will link their website, their socials, so you can follow along on their whole process, as well as the link for 20% off your first order. Again, that's Autumn Summers at checkout for 20% off your first order. I am not sponsored by Viva. I just fully believe in the brand. But if you do use that link to purchase some food, you are contributing to my pet's Viva Fund every month. Upcoming, I do have a great interview with you all with Dr. Judy Morgan, a holistic veterinarian with 38 plus years of experience. I'm really excited to share that with you guys. It will be upcoming in November. And please remember to go check out our Instagram because we share tons of content that you won't catch here. That is at a.balance.canine. All right, guys,